Repenting, reflecting, reasoning, reckoning. The Huddle.
It is now 22:06 on the Huddle this evening. Cameron Slater, whaleoil.co.nz is with me. Hello, Cameron.
Hello, Larry.
And we've got David Farrar from kiwiblog.co.nz. Hello, David.
Good day.
All right, Cameron, first to you. The government is looking into civil detention orders.
Yep.
Where the worst type of criminals can be kept in jail after their sentence is completed. The High Court would have to issue the order, and I think there's, 6 to 10 offenders in this category. What do you make of this? I suspect we all want these mongrels to be kept inside, but I suspect there's going to be human rights issues here.
Well, are they human, though? That's the point. I mean, these are people who like to enjoy, indeed, having sex with children and things like that. There's only about 12 of them, and they're perhaps some of the most sickest people we have out there, and they really are best kept in prison. In the old days, they would have been kept in Lake Alice or somewhere like that.
Yeah. And I agree with that, David, but the fact is we have an issue here, and that is that they have served their sentence.
Yeah, but I think what we're talking about here is a necessary evil. The people this might apply to generally got sentenced before preventive detention was extended. So the impact is actually going to be the same as if they'd been given preventive detention. It just wasn't necessarily available for those offences at the time. Now, normally you don't like to change laws retrospectively, but in this case where it's got the protection of a high court, and it's everyone's saying if you let them out, they're going to rape or molest more
Except
people.
the Labour Party.
Well, I don't know what their position is. The Charles Bell press release,
and he's saying that basically they want to hug these 12 kiddie fiddlers that are in prison. They want to give them all the rights and protections of every other member of society, and they're going to die in the ditch to prevent Judith Collins honouring an election promise, which is what this law change is.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chevelle's just told me they don't really know their position yet because they don't know the detail in this bill, but they fall back on preventive detention. Isn't the thing here, Cameron, that they should have been sent to preventive detention in the first place, but as David says, well, it wasn't in place at that point. I mean, look, we're getting patsy sentences for the most horrific of crimes, aren't we? Weatherstone being one, Callaghan the other week, bashing his partner with a baseball bat and cutting her up. That's where this has to be dealt with, preventive detention at the outset, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's a whole wider debate out there that needs to be had around the whole idea of maximum sentencing. And I had this discussion on my blog last week with David Garrett, where he was saying we need to actually look at minimum sentencing, where you do 5 years, but you can't get out unless you've done some retraining or some reprogramming of these people. But the fact is these guys get sentenced to 7 years, 12 years, however many years, and they know no matter what, they're getting out at the end of that, and they've got no interest at all in reforming, no interest at all in attending courses to address their various proclivities. And they know they can get out, and the day after they get out, they'll be reoffending.
But these worst type criminals that we're talking about here, David, shouldn't be able to get out.
No, and that's why we've got the sentences now. I mean, preventive detention has been around for a while, but it used to be only if you've done multiple offending over time. And you've now got available for horrific first-time offences. In the end, I see this a bit like the criminally insane. If someone's incapable of knowing the difference between right and wrong, they can be indefinitely kept in a criminally insane thing. Now, these people do know the difference between right and wrong, but they choose to go and commit sexual crimes anyway. So I actually think it's just really extending what we've got for criminally insane people. Instead of just locking up those who are mad, we're also locking up those who are bad.
We'll come back in a moment. David Farrar and Cameron Slater with me. Newstalk ZB 16:06. It is now 14:06, back with Cameron Slater and David Farrar. Issue 2, Cam, is Labour's bill on paid parental leave, increased from 14 weeks to 6 months. They want to go for 12 months. This does have some support from the other parties, but it looks to be unaffordable to me. The taxpayer will have to pay.
Well, Labour doesn't really care, and I think what Sue Moroney's doing here is passing on the Moroney effect that she displayed so well in Hamilton in the election to the rest of the electorate, And the simple fact is that businesses are struggling, and Labor wants to heap additional costs onto them. And that's exactly what this is an additional cost. And the net result will be akin to what they did with the youth rates, where anyone who's classed as a breeder will basically be last on the list for any jobs.
How do you see it, David?
Well, actually, the bill's not going to rest in this case with the employers, but the taxpayer, because it's the taxpayer who, in this case, be paying for the extra paid parental leave. And it's around $150 million a year. Now, look, we are struggling to get back into surplus. We've got a huge debt issue, and to say we should spend an extra $150 million a year on something that's not going to grow the economy, not an essential. It's what you call a nice to have. I've got a bit of an old-fashioned view, though, when it comes to this. I think couples, when they are talking about having more children, should decide, can we afford to have more? And you shouldn't be actually relying on the taxpayer. You should be making a decision for yourself. Do we think we can manage a second or a third child?
All right. Issue 3, Cameron, is the asylum seekers, refugee seekers in Darwin refuelling, and they're on their way to New Zealand, Falun Gong. How do you see this? They reckon that they've got UN refugee status, but as Aussie Malcolm told me, there's something sniffy, there's something that just doesn't smell quite right.
Just reading the news about that, you've got to admire these guys. The Chinese, they're obviously well-resourced because they've got a seaworthy vessel and they're able to restock it. So they're hardly on what I'd say the bones of their arse, are they? Trying to escape an oppressive regime. They seem to be well-financed, well-resourced, and they're having a bit of a laugh. And Julia Gillard seems to be having a bit of a laugh as well, because she's saying, oh, look, we're not really in a position where we could detain them against their will because their boat's so seaworthy and they've got resources.
David, quick word on this.
Look, it's very simple. If they're genuine refugees, then they'd want to stop at the first country that would take them, and they're there, Australia. If they're talking about coming to New Zealand because they prefer it here, that's not a genuine refugee. That's people saying we prefer the standard of living or think it will be nicer to be in New Zealand.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the NZEI's $280,000 campaigning against the national standards at the last election, but I've run out of time. Cameron Slater, thank you, Cam. Cameron Slater, whaleoil.co.nz, and David Farrar from kiwiblog.co.nz. It's 11 to 6.